Good afternoon, good morning, good evening.
A troop of Boy Scouts headed to Possum Run Creek one Saturday morning in January of 1988. Their mission was to pick up aluminum cans for a recycling project.
Guys, look. What is that down there?
In the icy creek in rural Ohio, they spotted what appeared to be a mannequin.
They saw something just under the ice, submerged.
It was the body of a young woman. Local police took every possible precaution to preserve trace evidence by wrapping the victim's body in a sheet before taking it to the morgue. A check of missing persons reports identified the woman as 32-year-old Margie Coffey, the single mother of 2 young children. She had been reported missing 10 days earlier.
The police had found her vehicle down off of Park Avenue East by a bar, and she was a missing person by the time this body was located over by the Mohican Park.
The autopsy revealed that Margie Coffey had been strangled with her own scarf. The coroner estimated she had been dumped in the creek 10 days earlier, the same day she disappeared. Margie Ramey was her maiden name. She was one of 6 children who grew up in the heartlands of Ohio on the outskirts of a town named Butler.
Hi, Patrick.
And she was an outgoing girl, personal. Well, she was a robust girl, and she loved life.
How are you doing?
She worked on the farm, and then she would help her mother on the farm. They had a lot of cattle to take care of, and she helped in that.
Margie grew up in a loving, religious home. But in her teenage years, as most kids do, she yearned for independence, began spending most of her time in Mansfield, a larger city about 15 miles northwest of Butler. She made friends with an unsavory crowd.
She got into some activities that were subject to prosecution by the law. And they were mainly street crimes, that type of thing that probably were very low level, but that's how we got to be acquainted with her during our work on the street.
Those street crimes allegedly included prostitution and illegal drug use.
Warming up here again.
Eventually, Margie rejected that life. She met a man named Steve Coffey. The two married and had a daughter, Angie. But the marriage soured, and Margie and Steve divorced. To support herself and her daughter, Margie worked as a waitress. She also enrolled in college to study law enforcement. And during this time, Margie had another child out of wedlock. This time, a son, Brandon. Police investigating her murder wondered if Margie had returned to the streets to support her children.
Well, I know her family helped her some, but she didn't make a lot of money and going to school. No, she didn't make a lot of money working in a restaurant.
As police knew from experience, life on the streets meant special dangers and a large pool of potential suspects.
Get away!
Maybe there's somebody in her past that has a reason to want her dead. Maybe she's done something or not paid something. Maybe some street person has come to this conclusion that they ought to kill her.
With no suspects or leads, police hoped that the rushing water of Possum Run Creek had not washed away evidence which could lead them to Margie's killer. When 32-year-old Margie Coffey was found strangled in a frozen creek, police wondered if her past had finally caught up with her.
In her particular case, since she had a background of some activity that was certainly against the law, we looked into that possibility that she may have slipped back into that drug environment.
But friends said that wasn't the case. Margie had been focusing her attention on her family and her education.
They were just adamant that they had not seen her, she hadn't been around, and to their knowledge, she had completely cleaned up all of her past activities.
Margie was raising, taking care of the children on her own, and she loved her children. She loved them. She really loved them. And I feel that Margie was a good mother. I really do.
She had also rediscovered religion.
I believe she wanted to be a Christian lady. From all that I could gather from her, that's what she was striving for. To be better, to live better, to act better, and forget all about anything in the past.
Police learned that Margie had been actively dating since her divorce. Among the men she was seeing were two Mansfield police officers, both of whom were married. One was Robert Lemon, a veteran of the force.
He indicated to us that it had ended sometime before that, probably a year and a half minimum, and that he had not had any contact with her and even spoken to her for any reason.
The other was Lieutenant Charles Oswald. He too said his relationship with Margie was over.
Lieutenant Oswald was very much in love with his wife, oftentimes spoke about what they did on weekends and things like that. He was a type of police officer that other police officers, I would say, would try to emulate.
Lieutenant Oswald furnished a police report indicating he had been on duty that night on a drug investigation. The trail of Margie's killer was growing cold.
We had no fingerprints, we had no weapon, we had to explore the other possibilities, and those possibilities really were going to come from her.
Margie Coffey was last seen alive at this diner, sitting in a booth with her school books open, studying for a class. Detective David Messmore interviewed the owner of the diner, who said that Lieutenant Oswald was in the diner the same time as Margie. The two weren't sitting together, but they did acknowledge one another.
It was a very distressing situation. Not only did I work with him, I knew he was a very good policeman, but I'd been friends with him. And it was very upsetting to me to think that he might have been involved in a crime like that.
When confronted with this information, Lieutenant Oswalt refused to comment. Margie's parents laid their daughter to rest, an excruciating task few parents are prepared for.
Margie's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ramey, suffered from that day on. There was times that they would just break down and cry when they would see a picture of Margie, or when Mrs. Ramey would talk to me.
Little did police realize that Margie's own son would provide a tantalizing clue, one that would lead them to the killer. As the search for Margie Coffey's killer continued, a Mansfield police officer told homicide investigators about a suspicious incident that occurred the night Margie was killed. The officer said he saw Lieutenant Charles Oswalt, who had been linked romantically to Margie, on foot, out of uniform, and behaving strangely near the police station.
And he had a leather jacket on, which would be unusual at that time of the night due to the fact that he was working.
This officer said, "What's going on? How you doing?" And he kind of ignored him. And he continued on walking into the police department through the back way.
Oswalt's behavior cast doubt on his claim that he was investigating a drug operation that night.
For him to be nervous and excited in that period of time was kind of unusual. That kind of took the luster or the punch out of his alibi.
In the forensics lab, Margie Coffey's clothing would soon tell a story of its own.
We had a scarf, you had leg warmers, you had a heavy coat. Once the clothing is dry, basically it'll be hung on a hanger, just like your clothing would be at home. There'll be a piece of paper placed underneath in case anything naturally falls off. And then the article is simply held and scraped with a spatula all the way down to help lift these articles off and let them fall onto the paper to be collected.
While most of the trace evidence had been washed away by the water, a very small amount remained.
We recovered a number of hairs and fibers, in particular 2 fibers, red in color. The presence of these 2 fibers, about 1/4 of an inch in length, no more than twice the size of a human hair across, were all we had to really work with.
While
Hey,
different
Linda.
fibers may look similar to the naked
Where's
eye,
the cat? There. Oh, she's on a box, watching the birds.
under a microscope, they
Hi,
are very
Patrick.
distinctive. The foreign fibers on Margie's coat and leg warmers were triangular in shape, or trilobal.
To make some fajita burgers. These will be different.
From the
Then we'll
side,
try the
this
Chinese
trilobal
burgers.
shape gives the appearance of
Try
having a
everything.
stripe running along the side.
Right, these
Trilobal
all
carpet is
charged.
usually found in high traffic areas like hotels and automobile interiors since it hides dirt. Tony Tambasco
Okay, kitty?
took carpet samples from every location where
You like
Margie
it,
had
yeah?
been in the
That nice,
days
yeah?
before her murder.
Yeah.
Tambasco thought he found what he was looking for in the home
Tuna.
of Margie's parents.
For a dinner.
And at Margie's parents' house, we found a floor mat that actually had red carpet. The red carpet fibers in the floor mat looked very similar to those that we had recovered from the victim.
But under a microscope, that carpet was not similar to the fibers on Margie's clothes. Since Lieutenant Oswalt was seen in the diner with Margie on the night she disappeared, Tambasco wanted to examine the police cruiser Oswalt had been driving that night. Most police vehicles are not carpeted because of heavy use and have rubber flooring instead. But police records revealed that on the night in question, Lieutenant Oswalt was the watch commander, and the watch commander's vehicle was different from the others.
The unique thing about that particular cruiser, cruiser number 306, was it was a supervisor's car. It wasn't your standard police car that you buy every year with the fleet. It was bought at a public auction.
The Mansfield police had gone to an auction and purchased a Chevy Caprice Classic, a full-size car for their commanders. And of course, the upper echelon of the police department have a little nicer vehicle than the guys in the street.
The carpet in the watch commander's car was red. Tabasco took a small sample from the vehicle. At first, it looked similar to the carpet in Margie's parents' house. But under a microscope, the fibers told a different story and were similar in all respects to the fibers found on Margie's clothing.
We looked at color. You can see the color's the same. We looked at diameter. You can see the diameter is consistent. We looked at the trilobal design, and the pattern does show that.
Chemical tests revealed that both sets of fibers had been dyed with the same chemicals. But fiber evidence, unlike DNA or a fingerprint, is not definitive.
The presence of the fibers, being consistent with the fibers in the vehicle, is not an identification to the exclusion of all others. It's not an absolute. There's no way anyone should come to court, or there's no way anyone can come to court and testify that that fiber came from that carpet. It's just not going to happen.
But even more damning evidence against Officer Oswald would come from Margie's 6-year-old son, Brandon.
Would you like some treats? Mummy got you new treats today. Want some treats?
The circumstantial evidence in Margie Coffey's murder all pointed to Lieutenant Charles Oswald. So did the forensic evidence. The 2 red carpet fibers on Margie's clothing were microscopically similar to the carpet in Oswald's automobile.
Yeah?
But the question haunting police was motive. If Oswald murdered Margie Coffey, why did he do it? After Margie had given birth to her second child, Brandon, she told social services that she couldn't identify the baby's father since the pregnancy was the result of a rape. But later, when she applied for financial aid at college, she was required to identify Brandon's father and explain why she wasn't receiving child support.
When she became a Jehovah's Witness and they began to counsel with her, they found these details out. They said, look, you can't lie. You're to tell the truth.
And she named Chuck Oswald as the father.
With this news, prosecutors asked Oswald to undergo a paternity test. It revealed that the likelihood of Oswald being Brandon's father was greater than 99%. Investigators also discovered that Oswald had refused to pay for child support when Margie asked, possibly because he didn't want his wife to find out about his infidelity.
Lieutenant Oswald was married, had children. In fact, up until all of this broke, his wife didn't know anything about Margie Coffey, did not know that he had a child by another woman. And so I'm sure that her finding that out certainly was motive for what happened.
Oswald allegedly offered Margie a few $1,000s from an insurance settlement, which Margie refused as insufficient. During Charles Oswald's murder trial, prosecutors presented one more piece of evidence against him. A woman who had once worked for police as a decoy in prostitution investigations, Charlene Dry Sawyer, testified that she, too, had been having an affair with Oswald. Sawyer claimed that Oswald had not only told her he murdered Margie Coffey, he also provided details of the crime. Sawyer said that after Oswald and Margie saw one another in the diner, they went to Oswald's police car to talk. They discussed the child support matter and Oswald's offer of $3,000 to end the dispute.
Take the $3,000 and get out.
No, it's not enough.
With Margie's refusal, the conversation grew heated, and Margie threatened to disclose that Oswald was Brandon's father.
I will file a lawsuit, and your wife and kids will find out about this. Slut!
Margie slapped him. Oswald responded by strangling her with her own scarf. The forensic evidence reveals that Oswald put Margie's lifeless body in the back seat of his police car, where her coat and leg warmers picked up the tiny red triangular-shaped carpet fibers. Later, prosecutors say Oswalt drove to the bridge over Possum Run Creek and dumped the body into the water in the mistaken belief that any incriminating evidence would be washed downstream.
Found a bit.
You know, when it's yellow and it waddles and it quacks, it's probably a duck. And that's the case that we had here.
At his trial, Lieutenant Oswalt took the stand in his own defense and denied killing Margie Coffey. He repeated his claim that he had been working alone that night on a drug investigation and offered the typed police report to prove it. But prosecutors contended that the report was bogus, implying that Oswalt himself had typed the phony report after the murder to give himself an alibi. The jury found Lieutenant Charles Oswalt guilty of voluntary manslaughter and abusing a corpse. He was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. To this day, Oswalt insists he did not kill Margie Coffey.
I was trying to fix
He
it.
may
What
deny
you
it,
put on it?
and he may go to the
I
grave
won't
denying
fix it. Get some super glue on
I
it.
think he is guilty. Now, if I'm
No,
wrong,
thank you.
God forgive me.
For residents of Mansfield,
Get some super glue
the
on it.
ultimate betrayal is a policeman who commits murder.
I mean, it's bad enough to murder someone, but then when you're supposed to be protecting people, and then using the office of authority to kill someone, then that's the lowest murder that I can think of.
He will never, ever, ever admit that crime. I don't care if they keep him in jail till he dies. He will go to his grave with that in his mind. He will never, ever. And I really believe that.
Yep.
Prosecutors say that it was solid police work and some luck that helped seal the case.
The presence of these red fibers in that carpet was simply a shot in the dark. A police car in our own backyard, a police car in our fleet. The uniqueness of that police car being bought at auction, the chance of that, 1 in a million.
And without the forensic evidence, Lieutenant Oswalt might not have been brought to justice.
I'd say this was one of the key pieces of evidence, and it would have been more difficult for a jury to have convicted him, if not impossible.
Difficult. Over there.
In 1991, a high school girl vanished after attending a party. Her abandoned vehicle was found in a school parking lot near her home. The prime suspect had not one, but two alibi witnesses for the night she disappeared. A solid alibi can often overcome much circumstantial evidence. But forensic evidence is another matter. On a Saturday night in November of 1991, 17-year-old Crystal Faye Todd was dropped off in a mall parking lot after attending a party. Since Crystal didn't have to be home for another hour, she said she was going to get something to eat before heading home. It was the last time Crystal was seen alive. When she wasn't home by 1 a.m., her mother contacted police.
Floyd County Police, may I help you?
She also called Crystal's best friend, Ken Register, who said he hadn't seen Crystal all night.
After I talked to Ken Register, I called one of my friends, and he got up out of bed and come in. We went all over Conway hunting her, see if we could find her car anywhere.
They found her car the next morning in a nearby school parking lot. Her purse and coat were inside.
I don't know why I had the feeling. It just something come over me that somebody had Crystal.
17-year-old Crystal Faye Todd was a senior in high school living in the small tobacco farming town of Conway, South Carolina.
I was 39 and she was born. She was a miracle to me. And I just couldn't believe I had her. I was proud of her too.
Crystal's dad died when she was very young. But she grew up as a happy child, active in her church, sung in the youth group choir, and dreamt of going to college.
She was very lively, good personality, good humor, very outgoing. Just loved to be with her friends, hanging out, having a good time.
Just a few hours after Crystal's abandoned car was found in a school parking lot, two hunters in a remote field noticed a trail of blood.
No load for you.
It led to a nearby ditch. There lay a woman's body with multiple stab wounds and partially disrobed.
It was brutal.
Yeah, that's that bit.
And it was it's a scene that will be with me for a long time.
It was sexual in nature. I mean, it wasn't a murder just to murder someone. It was sexual gratification.
On the victim's finger was a high school ring. Engraved on the inside was the name Crystal Todd.
I just wish it could have been me instead of her. I'd lived a long time. She hadn't lived no time.
Investigators thought the perpetrator might have been from outside the area, but forensic evidence at the crime scene pointed much closer to home.
Well, I don't really have a life anymore. I just exist. I go from one day to the next. And I don't even want to get up out of bed and face another day. It's just horrible. It don't get any better.
Residents of Conway, South Carolina were appalled by Crystal Faye Todd's senseless murder.
Cool.
Medical examiner Dr. Jamie Downs performed the autopsy.
She did have the defense injury to the left hand because we thought that odd at the time. Why would someone have defended himself with their left hand? She was right-handed. Why not use her right hand or dominant hand?
The answer was discovered soon enough. One of the stab wounds penetrated the left side of her skull, which would have immediately paralyzed her right side.
What does a defense wound tell you? It tells you the victim was conscious. It tells you the victim was not bound. It tells you the victim was cognizant of danger.
Some of the wounds didn't cause bleeding, an indication they were made after death.
The victim is completely dead. The victim is no longer struggling, yet the offender still had enough anger that he incised or cut the body after death.
In all, she was stabbed 31 times.
What's the matter? You still...
The term that we use is overkill. That's more wounding that is necessary to take someone's life.
When Dr. Downs measured the wounds, he concluded that the murder weapon was a 3.5-inch knife, the type with a blade that locks in place. It would have had to be a locking blade, or it couldn't have penetrated the skull. Forensic evidence confirmed she had been sexually assaulted, and that she was murdered on one side of the road and the body dumped on the other.
You know, one of them bits.
Well, what it told me is that he was panicking, and he simply wanted to disassociate himself from the crime. It told me that he probably had never killed before, and he was inexperienced in this type of crime.
In search for suspects, investigators first looked through Crystal's personal papers. On one of Crystal's school notebooks was the name Andy Tyndall written on the cover. Friends say Crystal met Tyndall through a mutual acquaintance. Tyndall was a 31-year-old convicted thief wanted in Alabama for a parole violation. Police also discovered that he had a taste for high school girls.
No doubt about it.
Which
We thought we
one's
had a
stripy
man who
stuff?
fit what we were looking for.
Forensic scientists evaluated the rape test kit from Crystal's autopsy and discovered that the killer had type O blood with an extremely rare blood subtype characterized by the enzyme PGM.
It stands for phosphoglucomutase. That is an enzyme that is stable in body fluids from individuals. The blood type, the secretor status, and the PGM subtype made him approximately 2% of the population.
And the DNA profile of the perpetrator was highly unusual as well.
We found that the profile was in fact rare and occurred with a frequency of approximately 1 in 250 million Caucasians and 1 in 1.5 billion blacks.
Surprisingly, this forensic information exonerated their prime suspect, Andy Tyndall. More than 1,000 people attended Crystal Faye Todd's funeral. Crystal's best friends served as her pallbearers. Her grieving mother and police appealed to the community for any information about the crime. In response, a resident of Conway came forward to say he had driven by the school parking lot on the night Crystal disappeared and saw Crystal's car with a man and a woman standing beside it. Now police had another lead. A police sketch of his description looked to many like Crystal's mother, Bonnie, and her boyfriend.
There's no question in my mind as I sit here today that the individual in that sketch is Bonnie Faye Todd's boyfriend.
Police wondered just how much Crystal's mother knew about the murder. A witness told police that on the night Crystal disappeared, he had seen two people standing near Crystal's car in the parking lot. His description matched Crystal's mother and her mother's boyfriend. But when questioned further, the witness admitted he had been drinking that night and may have seen Crystal's mother on Sunday morning when she and her boyfriend found Crystal's car.
That's the bit I was looking for.
I thought it was awful.
There.
Yet, much as I love my daughter to even try to blame it on me.
With Bonnie no longer a suspect and their previous suspect, Andy Tyndall, exonerated by DNA testing, investigators had no other leads. So police commissioned a behavioral profile of the killer.
Well, criminal behavior profiling is
Well, the
when
pieces
you have
are
an
in there.
unsolved case,
Well, you can't
and you
find
study
them.
the crime and the behavior of the offender during the commission of the crime, and you arrive at characteristics. It's a subjective opinion. You arrive at characteristics and traits of the unidentified offender, such as age, race, marital status, arrest history, educational level, things of that nature.
The profile suggested that Crystal's killer was a white male in his early 20s and was a friend of Crystal's who lived within 3 miles of her home. The young man was angry and probably had a police record. He was physically strong. Above all, The profile suggested that he was confident he would never be considered
Don't
a
mind me
suspect.
filling your hole in, do you?
Since the profile suggested that the killer was one of Crystal's friends, police asked her male classmates and acquaintances to voluntarily give blood samples for DNA testing. Despite the challenge to their civil liberties, 52 men complied.
It wasn't, well, anything's voluntary, but they still had a pool of names that they were pulling from. And, you know, and then when they pulled the name, then they would ask if you would go down and give the DNA test or give the specimen. And everybody volunteered. I haven't heard of anybody not doing it.
Incredibly, one of those DNA profiles matched the DNA of the perpetrator, donor number 44. When investigators asked Crystal's mother to name the one person she would least expect to hurt her daughter, she identified the same man.
He says, who do you trust her with, day or night, anytime, anywhere that you won't date? And I said, Ken Register.
Ken Register and Crystal Todd had known each other since childhood. Their relationship wasn't romantic, they were simply very good friends. They spoke together almost every day, and it was Ken whom Mrs. Todd first called for help on the night Crystal disappeared. Ken had also been one of Crystal's pallbearers. When police checked Ken Register's background, they discovered two troubling pieces of information. First, he had an explosive temper, and he also had a criminal record. Two months earlier, two local college students accused Register of exposing himself when he stopped to ask for directions.
I'm lost. I'm looking for the library. Can you help me out here?
3 years before that, as a 15-year-old, Register was caught making obscene telephone calls to this woman in which he described in detail how he wanted to assault and murder her.
He said he would slit me wide open and many other graphic descriptions.
The murder Register described in these calls was identical to the murder of Crystal Faye Todd.
Exactly where were you the night that Crystal died?
But Ken Register was flabbergasted when told his blood DNA matched Crystal's killer. He asked police rhetorically why he would have agreed to a blood test if he was the killer. When police searched Register's car, they could find no evidence linking him to the crime scene. Register also had an alibi. His girlfriend said he was with her at this go-kart track that night, and his mother said Ken was home by 12:30.
That alibi is about as strong as you're going to get. Very surprising to me. And it's always compelling evidence.
I know where I was at, when I was out there that night, right here at my house, and I know when he came in.
Although Ken Register's mother was his alibi witness, she would later play a key role in solving Crystal Todd's murder. Crystal Todd's best friend, Ken Register, was now the prime suspect in her murder. His DNA matched the DNA found at the crime scene, but he insisted he was innocent and provided two alibi witnesses, his girlfriend and his mother. Ken had been a regular guest in Crystal's home, but Mrs. Todd said she knew nothing about his criminal past.
If I'd have known about the indecent exposure and the threatening phone calls, Ken Register wouldn't have put his foot in my house. But I didn't find out about it till it was too late.
And Mrs. Todd now reveals something her daughter told her, which may hint at the motive.
In a week and a half before she was killed, she said, Mama Ken's still wanting me to date him. I said, well, he must think a lot of him and him with a girlfriend. Yeah, she said that's all he wanted was sex. And I said, well, don't go with him then.
Okay, Ken, let's go over this again.
During police questioning, Ken Register
No, nothing
denied
goes
any
that.
involvement in the murder. But
We'll keep
towards
to
the
that.
end of a 6-hour interrogation, police told him his mother had sent him a message.
I'm trying all them, it doesn't work. The load missing. It's like I built all this and stuff. Something's not right, love. Ken, it's a note from your mother. Mother says to tell us exactly what happened and to be truthful about it. And if you do, your mother says everything will be okay.
And with that, Ken Register confessed.
I did it.
He said he saw Crystal around midnight at a traffic light near the school parking lot.
Hey, Crystal. Hey, what's up?
Hey.
How are you? Hey, listen, wanna go hang out or do something for a little bit?
Yeah, cool. All right. Wait, just let me go park.
I'll follow.
Okay. All right.
Crystal got into his car. They drove to a deserted location where Register said the two had consensual sex. The forensic evidence suggests it wasn't consensual at all.
What, no condom? Are you stupid? Oh my god. Look, Ken, I'm telling you right now, if I get pregnant, I'm telling everybody you raped me. Don't blow it off, I'm serious. Asshole.
When she got out of the car to get dressed, Register said he grabbed the hunting knife from the car and killed her. Further sexual activity took place after death.
I don't think Crystal Faye Todd did anything that night to cause her death, other than the mere fact she got in the car with him.
Prosecutors believe that Register cleaned his car sometime after the crime to remove possible evidence.
The evidence had been systematically destroyed before we realized that he was a suspect.
In Register's home, police found an empty box. A box for a knife with a locking blade. Forensic scientists determined that the missing knife would have been similar to the weapon used to inflict Crystal's stab wounds. Before the trial, Register recanted his confession, saying it was coerced. He said police lied to him about the contents of his mother's note. But lying to a suspect during a police interrogation is perfectly legal.
There's no doubt in my mind that Mr. Register brutally and viciously killed Crystal Faye Todd. And there's also no doubt in my mind that he enjoyed doing it.
I mean, there was just too much time unaccounted for. He had plenty, ample time to do everything that he was accused of and still be home when he said he got home.
But why did Register willingly give a blood sample for DNA testing if he was the perpetrator? Published reports say that when police requested a DNA sample, Ken Register asked, "What is DNA?" At the time, DNA testing had been used in criminal cases for about 5 years, but Register was apparently unfamiliar with it since it hadn't yet been used in the state of South Carolina. His case was the first. Ken Register was convicted of murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. He was sentenced to life in prison, plus 35 years.
They found him guilty. I was glad they found him guilty now. I was proud of that. But I want him to get let.
Abuse him all.
Mental job. Psycho.
We've done all that for you.
I don't know what's wrong, but something's not clicking to
Thank you.
where you're supposed to be clicking.
Thank you very much.
Ken Register and his family still say he is innocent. But several subsequent DNA tests have all confirmed the original findings.
I know what I know because I know I was home
together.
that night,
It's
and I know
coming
when he came
together.
home. I can't explain the DNA. I wish I could. There's so many questions in this that you can't explain.
Based on everything that I know about the violence of this crime, and is that when he left the scene of that murder, he would have been a bloody mess.
I think there's a lot of covering up going on in that house. She seen him be covering blood all over, and I know he was covering blood all over. He had to be. If she helped clean him up, she got Crystal's blood on her hands, too.
Bonnie Faye Todd visits Crystal's grave faithfully, and she thanks science for bringing Crystal's killer to justice.
I love you more than I do my own life.
Without the DNA and the blood, we would have never gotten to first base, probably never even made an arrest.
That's scary.
Yeah.
A young woman vanished from her home on an island in rural Canada. Thousands of police, army, and local residents spent months searching for her. This is the story of how one tiny white hair solved the mystery of her disappearance while adding a new chapter to the history of forensic science. Prince Edward Island, Canada's smallest province, a 2,100 square mile vacation destination in the summer, cold and desolate in the winter. Father Elwha Arsenault has ministered to the islanders for almost 30 years.
We're not used to big violent things going on because people are very much down to earth and everybody knows everyone because we're a small community. It's not a very large population on the island, you know.
On October 7, 1994, a woman called police to report an abandoned car in a field near her house. The license plates were missing, and when police looked inside, they saw what looked to be a crime scene.
There were bloodstains, small specks of blood on the windshield, on the inside of the windshield, on the side windows of the vehicle inside.
These dots indicate the location of blood inside the car. Forensic scientists identified the blood as medium impact blood spatter, the type caused when someone is hit with an object like a fist. The serial number of the vehicle identified the owner as a local woman, 32-year-old Shirley Duguay. Shirley was a stay-at-home mother of 5 children, the oldest 15, the youngest 8-year-old twins. Shirley and her children were living in this home, now abandoned in the small town of Richmond. Her father, Melvin, had been watching the children since Shirley disappeared 4 days earlier.
Well, we found it very odd that no one had reported her missing initially, and of course it raised some suspicion with us.
Shirley Duguay had been known in the past to take off for a couple of days, not tell anyone where she had gone, and then return.
Police suspected it was Shirley's blood in the car. The pillow she sat on while driving was found nearby, soaked in blood.
She was a very small, diminutive person, 4 feet 9 inches tall, less than 100 pounds. So very, very frail looking individual. Other than that, we didn't know too much about her.
To identify the blood, scientists needed a blood sample from Shirley's father, Melvin, for DNA testing. Since Shirley would get half of her DNA from each parent, scientists found that the blood in the car contained 50% of Melvin Duguay's genetic markers, meaning the blood was Shirley's. While examining the blood, forensic scientists found something else. Blood that did not come from Shirley Duguay. Was this the blood of another victim, or possibly the blood of a killer? After Shirley Duguay's car was found abandoned and spattered with blood, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police began one of the largest searches in the history of Prince Edward Island. They checked hundreds of square miles and every waterway in the area.
We use psychics, we use hypnosis. Anything that we could put our hands on or could think of, we used it.
Some of the revelations were very unusual.
Psychics have even told us that she was buried near water or pine trees, shallow grave, but where? You know, you just don't know where to start.
About a half-mile away from Shirley's car, police found a shovel with 2 long black hairs attached. When scientists compared that hair to hair taken from Shirley Duguay's hairbrush, they were microscopically similar. The search for Shirley's body lasted for weeks. Then, investigators came upon a possible clue. 15 miles from Shirley's car, police found a plastic bag with a pair of sneakers and a blood-stained leather jacket inside. The blood on the leather jacket matched Shirley Duguay's DNA profile. But the jacket was a man's size, much too big to belong to Shirley. When police asked Melvin Duguay who might have wanted to harm his daughter, his response was startling.
I would have killed him. I would have killed that guy.
He was talking about Shirley's estranged husband, Doug Beamish, a demolition worker who had been separated from Shirley for the past 18 months.
I think I would have did a good deed if I had a shot him, killed him. Because she'd be alive today. I'd be in jail, but she'd be alive.
During the couple's on-again, off-again 15-year relationship, police learned that Beamish had physically abused Shirley.
Every woman that lives with an abusive husband or boyfriend or whatever and end up murdered react in the same way. People advise them to not go with them or live with them, but for some reason they do.
Are you having any issues or problems?
During police questioning, Beamish denied any involvement in Shirley's disappearance.
Where were you on October the 3rd?
Then investigators asked him what size shoes he wore.
9.
The same size as the sneakers found with the bloody leather jacket. Now police wanted to know if Doug Beamish had worn these shoes, so they turned to a forensic podiatrist, Dr. Keith Bettles. Everyone wears shoes differently, mostly because of the variations in size, shape, and mechanics of their feet.
Each individual has a unique way of walking. This ultimately is transmitted to the sole of the feet, which again is transmitted to the inner sole of the shoe, and again onto the outside of the shoe as to where they're walking to the wear on that individual's shoe.
With a warrant, police cast Beamish's feet by placing them in styrofoam molds, then poured plaster of Paris inside. Once hardened, the molds can be compared to the wear patterns in a pair of shoes. This computer-generated image shows how these wear patterns are created. The different colors indicate the amount of pressure made by each part of the foot as it touches the inside of the shoe. The feet create marks called pressure points and are unique to each person.
Mr. Beamish's toe was hyperflexed. That means it just turned up a little bit at the end. The nails would be chaffing away and rubbing at the inner lining of the shoe.
And Beamish's feet were pronated, meaning they turned inward. When Dr. Bettles cut open the sneakers, he found wear patterns caused by pronated feet and chafing marks in the top of the shoe like those caused by hyperflexed toes.
After I'd done the examination of the sneakers, I was quite satisfied that these shoes had been worn at the time by Mr. Beamish.
But Doug Beamish denied the sneakers were his. He also denied owning the leather jacket found with the shoes. Inside the jacket, investigators discovered even more evidence. 20 brittle white hairs. Under a microscope, the hairs did not appear to be human. Human hairs have thin medullas, the cord that runs through the center of the hair. These hairs had thick medullas, meaning they were animal hairs. But what animal? Constable Roger Savoy thought he had an answer. He remembered something from his interview with Doug Beamish. It was the type of observation we make hundreds of times each day, but usually forget.
Well, what's there to tell?
Savoy recalled that he saw a cat in Doug Beamish's home. But it wasn't just any cat. It was a pure white one. A cat Beamish called Snowball. Savoy also recalled that the cat rubbed up against his leg during his visit, leaving a number of white hairs on his trousers. Hairs that looked identical to the ones found in the bloody leather jacket. Investigators now wondered whether there was any way to prove scientifically whether the cat hairs on the leather jacket belonged to Snowball. "33-year-old Shirley Duguay was still missing, but a leather jacket stained with her blood was found 15 miles from her abandoned car. Police believe the leather jacket was the key to her disappearance.
The person involved in Shirley's death was likely wearing that jacket because it was not Shirley's jacket. So we had to put the jacket on somebody. We had to prove that jacket belonged to someone.
Inside the jacket were several brittle white hairs, which were suspected to be from Doug Beamish's cat.
If we could prove that it was this particular cat's hair, then we would be able to say that this belonged to Mr. Beamish, the jacket. And the job was to find someone that could do this type of testing.
Just go up too quick.
Savoy made hundreds of telephone calls and found, to his surprise, that forensic testing on cat hair had never been done before anywhere in the world.
Do some DNA testing for us.
But he was fortunate enough to come across Dr. Stephen O'Brien, a geneticist at the National Cancer Institute in the United States who had spent decades studying hereditary illness in cats.
The constable said to me on the phone, "Dr. O'Brien, I've looked all over the country, in fact all over the world, for an expert in cat DNA technology because I would like very much to know whether or not the hairs that were in the lining of the jacket, which are tied to the scene of the crime because the jacket was covered with the victim's blood, are those hairs from Snowball?"
Dr. O'Brien asked Canadian police for a blood sample from Mr. Beamish's cat. But this was more difficult than expected. Snowball wasn't at all cooperative.
It took approximately half an hour from chasing the cat from under the beds to every room in the house until It was almost like the cat knew that we were taking him in.
Roger Savoy told me he went down to the house and read out the rights, the cat's rights, to the parents. And I said to Roger, what did the cat say? And he said, meow.
There's an old saying with the RCMP, we always get our man, but this case we had to go to say we always get our cat.
After finally capturing the cat, Snowball was taken to a local veterinarian's office for the necessary blood sample. Dr. Jane Bond drew the blood as 2 Canadian officers stood by to take custody of the sample in order to preserve the chain of evidence. Snowball's blood and cat hairs taken from the leather jacket were delivered in person to Dr. O'Brien and his team. One of the hairs contained a root, which was cut into pieces and put into a buffer solution which dissolved everything except the DNA. It was then amplified or photocopied so scientists had enough for their tests. The DNA profile of the hair found in the leather jacket was then compared to the DNA from Snowball's blood.
We got a very clear match between the genotype of each of the markers in the hair to each of the same markers in Snowball. And the only way that that could have happened is that they came from the same cat.
But Prince Edward Island is isolated, and there are thousands of cats there. Was it possible, because of inbreeding, isolation, or just plain feline promiscuity, that another cat on the island had the same genetic profile as Snowball? If so, the DNA match would be useless.
You need to know that some other cat on Prince Edward Island couldn't have contributed that hair. What if 25% of the cats on Prince Edward Island had the same DNA profile, or 10%, or even 1 in 100 cats? So that's the next question you have to ask. What is the frequency of that profile?
Blood samples were taken from 20 cats on Prince Edward Island and sent to Dr. O'Brien and his team. The DNA profiles of these 20 cats showed a rich genetic diversity. The chance that the cat hair found on the leather jacket belonged to a cat other than Snowball was estimated to be 1 in 70 million. This was the break Canadian investigators had been hoping for. And then, after 7 months of searching, a fisherman found the last piece of evidence. "28 weeks into Shirley Duguay's disappearance, a fisherman along Canada's Armoire River saw a pile of brush on the riverbank that looked out of place. As he moved the brush away, he saw what appeared to be a human body.
It was a very shallow grave, dug just deep enough to cover the body. The person was a very tiny person. We knew Shirley Dugay was less than 5 feet tall, less than 100 pounds. Obviously, we expected it was Shirley Dugay.
I was alone by myself, and it started to snow. It was a freak snowstorm because, and I recall all I had on was a rain jacket, and I felt bad because the body was partly uncovered, so I took my rain jacket, which was all I had to keep warm, and put it on top of the grave to keep the snow off her.
Ironically, Shirley's body was buried in a spot nearly identical to what the police psychic predicted. Near the water, under pine trees.
Yes, I am doing
It's just
this
lucky
puzzle.
that they found her when they did, because the police told me that within 2 or 3 weeks more, and they would have had a hard time to identify her because the ground was thawing out.
They knew that there was very little hope of finding her alive, and when they found her, they were very relieved in the sense that they knew at least that they could have a service for her and pray and get together, and they could sort of bring a closure to it.
At the autopsy, the cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma. Just as the blood spatter in her car suggested, Shirley's nose was broken and her jaw broken in 3 places. One of her front teeth was found embedded in her lung. Doug Beamish was arrested and charged with murder. Scientists discovered that it was his blood mixed with Shirley's inside her abandoned car. But what was his motive? Police discovered Beamish had written Shirley a letter threatening to kill her before he'd allow her to get custody of their children.
The whole letter was written in blood. It was just 1 page, mind you, but it was written in blood.
Although Beamish denied owning the leather jacket stained with Shirley's blood, police found this photograph taken the day before Shirley's disappearance. In it, he is wearing a jacket identical to the one found at the crime scene.
Well, actually, he has no defense at all, except to say I didn't do it. But I think if you interviewed all the prisoners in the prisons in Canada, they'd all say I didn't do it. That's pretty well. They've always got someone else to blame on. You know, criminals do that. They always blame someone else for the problems. They will certainly, you never see a criminal go in court and say, I did it, Judge.
After going to great lengths to cover up the crime, Beamish never realized that petting his cat before the murder would be his downfall.
1 in 3 criminals have cats, and maybe 1 in 4 have a dog. So when you go to the scene of the crime, and if there's a trace of DNA there, it's like leaving your name, your rank, and social security number, which can be used. And failing to have the individuals, if they leave their pets' parts there, that can implicate them too. This is what happened with Mr. Beamish. His pet cat implicated him.
Doug Beamish was tried and convicted of Shirley Duguay's murder and sentenced to 18 years in prison. The case is among the most celebrated in forensic history because it is the first time that animal DNA was used to convict a murderer.
Since then, we've received calls from, after the investigation, from all over the world. Literally, I received calls from Japan asking us how this worked. How did the animal DNA work?
I mean, I was actually surprised once the Snowball case became well known among the forensic community. I would say about once every 2 weeks, I would receive a phone call from a police department that was investigating a crime where a animal hair had been left behind, and they were asking us to help them.
T.S. Eliot penned these lines in his old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. You now have learned enough to see that cats are much like you and me. We've learned that applies to their DNA too. And Doug Beamish now wishes that this wasn't true. In a small town in Oregon in 1984, the first biological attack was launched against the United States. For over a decade, the details of this nearly catastrophic event were withheld from the public. This is how forensic science unearthed the biological trail. This small town in Oregon is called the Dalles and is perched high above the Columbia River, about 80 miles due east of Portland.
It seems like you've driven back in the 50s. And it seems, in that physical appearance, it seems frozen in time in that way.
Dave and Sandy Lutkins are among the 11,000 residents who find the Dalles the perfect place to raise a family.
A half an hour or an hour from skiing, a lot of water sports, a lot of hiking. It has pretty decent schools. We have pretty low crime.
On September 25, 1984, David and Sandy both became violently ill with cramps, diarrhea, and vomiting. Their dehydration caused delirium.
But I've never felt that bad in my life. The room was spinning, and you just didn't care about anything.
Well, let's put it this way. I would never want to be that sick again.
When David and his wife went to the hospital, they weren't the only ones seriously ill.
And then suddenly there were so many people. We had people laying on the floor. We had people leaning up against the wall. There were people in the lobby.
They all had the same symptoms. Microbiologists identified the cause: Salmonella. Salmonella is a bacteria commonly found in eggs, meat, poultry, unpasteurized milk, water, and in animal feces, especially that of reptiles. It is rarely fatal, but sometimes death occurs in infants and the elderly. 10 days after the first outbreak, a second wave hit. The number of patients exploded from dozens to hundreds. Every hospital bed was filled. By the time Dave Lutkins emerged from 4 days of delirium, he encountered a disaster. Lutkins owned a small restaurant. 13 of his employees were sick, along with hundreds of his customers.
We had virtually no business. I mean, it just disappeared. It was tough. I mean, I was in the process of building another facility in Hood River, and I was going to have it all paid for and opening up debt-free, and it didn't work out that way.
But what was the source of the outbreak? Food handlers who don't properly wash their hands after using the bathroom sometimes transmit salmonella. But hundreds of people were sick, and they hadn't eaten in the same restaurant or even the same restaurant chain. Tests of the water supply revealed nothing. The Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia was asked to investigate whether it was some type of accidental outbreak or was it intentional. Solving the riddle of the salmonella outbreak in Oregon is the job of epidemiologists, scientists who study how disease moves through large populations.
They seemed to be unrelated events, complicated things greatly. It was almost like doing multiple simultaneous investigations.
There seemed to be no common link among the hundreds of residents who had gotten sick. Dave and Sandy Lutkins both remembered eating a salad in their restaurant before getting ill.
I think we were too sick to worry that much about it at that time. It was later that we started, wondering if it was going to close us down.
Hundreds of their customers and most of their employees became ill too. At the county health department, Nurse Diane Kerr contacted everyone who fell ill and discovered they had all eaten a salad from one of 10 local restaurants.
Most of the people seemed to have eaten potato salad. At another restaurant, most of the people seemed to have eaten a green salad. And so what was going on?
They looked at common suppliers of food. They looked, where did everybody get their lettuce? Where did everybody get this? Where did everybody get that?
We couldn't find one source of cucumbers or lettuce or of meat or of anything that would explain all those restaurants being contaminated at once.
What do we got here?
Dr. Michael Skeels runs the laboratory that processed samples from the Dale salmonella outbreak. Microbiologists discovered that all of the victims had the same strain of salmonella, one that was exceptionally rare.
was dulcitol negative, which means it didn't biochemically break down a sugar called dulcitol, and that's only the case for 2% of salmonellas of this type.
This salmonella had another odd characteristic. Unlike most bacteria, this one was not resistant to antibiotics. When all the cases were tallied, there had been 751 cases of salmonella poisoning. 10% were restaurant workers.
And these people became ill before outbreaks among, the outbreak was noticed among customers.
Nevertheless, 2 months after the outbreak, the state of Oregon reported that poor hygiene of restaurant workers and cross-contamination were the most likely causes of the outbreak. In other words, they didn't know.
The Oregon Health Department basically hung us out and said, well, it was dirty employees, it was, it was unsafe practices, unsafe handling of food.
Officials found no salmonella in Dave Lutkin's restaurant, but they did find traces of it in some of the other restaurants.
If you've worked in public health long enough, you'll figure out that lots of times you really can't pinpoint where things come from.
The health officials said, this is the best we can tell you. It wasn't a very satisfying explanation for them or for the public or for the press, but at that time there was no other explanation.
Local officials now began to suspect a religious cult outside of town, the Rajneeshis. As the Rajneeshis expanded their compound, there had been growing tension between cult leaders and local politicians. Just a year earlier, one of the cult's leaders, Ma Anand Sheila, hinted at potential violence. She said, quote, "We are here in Oregon to stay at whatever the cost. If that means some blood is spilled, then this is the price we are prepared to pay." A guru from India, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, started the farming commune in 1981. After 2 years and $30 million, the 64,000-acre organic farming and meditation compound had its own post office, school, hospital, and shopping mall, with housing for over 1,000 followers.
There are doctors and lawyers and accountants who've given up everything to drive tractors and plant potatoes and have, daily chants.
As he drove through the compound each day in one of his 80 Rolls-Royce automobiles, the guru preached the benefits of meditation and free love. Published reports say that the Bhagwan claimed to have had more sex partners than anyone in history. In 1982, the Rajneeshis took over the nearby town of Antelope, and with it the majority of seats on the city council and school board, which horrified longtime residents of the small town. Before the outbreak, the Rajneeshis had set their sights on control of the larger town of the Dales and had put up their own slate of candidates running in the November election. In the absence of a scientific explanation, some thought the Rajneeshis might have intentionally poisoned the community in some way.
So there was suspicion, but there was no evidence.
Why would they do this? And the other thought was maybe there was somebody, some hothead, trying to incriminate the Rajneesh.
1 year later, the Rajneeshis' behavior grew even more bizarre, revealing evidence that would eventually solve the mystery. Since health officials could not find the source of the salmonella outbreak in the Dales, Oregon, suspicion among local officials continued to be the Rajneeshis, a religious cult living on a farm outside of town.
Like criminals being accused of poisoning someone who we have nothing to do with.
Leaders of the cult and town officials were often at odds. The cult was founded by Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, but the day-to-day operations were run by his associate, Ma Anand Sheila.
They met each other's needs. Sheila provided for him whatever he wanted. You want 60 Rolls Royces? We'll get you 60 Rolls Royces. You want a new disciple tonight? We'll get you a new disciple. You want to fly in a jet? We'll get you whatever to make you happy. And the trade-off was that the Bhagwan would say, okay, you're number one, you're in control, you take care of all the details. I don't care how you do it.
The Rajneeshis were becoming paranoid for many reasons. They were being investigated for possible immigration fraud, and there was growing internal conflict between Sheila and other commune leaders.
Nonsense. You better believe me, I'm a tigress.
She and her group were in a power struggle with another group, which we always kind of called the Hollywood faction. They were rich members of the cult, headed up by a lady who was the ex-wife of a Hollywood producer. They had money. They had access to Rajneesh. And Sheila and her group were very paranoid about these people.
The struggle was for control of the guru, the cult, and its finances. Former cult members told of plans to assassinate several local politicians, rival cult members, a United States attorney, and journalist Les Zeitz, in retaliation for some investigative pieces he had written about the group in the local newspaper.
To be told that you're on a hit list for a group that I believe at the time they were capable of, that they're just purely evil folks by that time, is really kind of chilling way to start the day.
1 year after the salmonella outbreak, without warning, Sheila and the head of the Rajneesh Medical Clinic, a nurse named Pooja, fled to Europe. Rajneesh disowned them.
They had turned it into a passive concentration camp.
Prosecutors heard that Pooja had been experimenting with biological poisons at the clinic, including salmonella. But there was no hard evidence. With the increasing scrutiny, the Bhagwan stepped up the level of personal security.
There were times when he would move from one end of the town to the other, where he would be in a bulletproof limousine. He would have a lead SUV with armed guards in it. He would have a trailing SUV with armed guards in it, and he'd have a Jet Ranger helicopter.
I do.
We could be confronted by a 45-person private army with fully
How are you
automatic
doing,
weapons.
NC?
In October of 1985, a federal grand jury issued a 35-page indictment charging the Bhagwan with lying on his visa application and arranging sham marriages so his followers could remain in the United States. When officials planned to search the compound, they asked epidemiologist Dr. Mike Skeels to come along because of fears of biological retaliation.
And as we were going up that road, I was thinking, for a microbiologist, this is going to be a pretty interesting day.
No shots were fired.
Tarot fucking cards. Fuck them off. This is what I've been up to, NC. Replacing all capping stones on these. Oh, alright, I've been out there. You know, I've been doing all the capping stones on this. You know, relaying them because they all come loose. So I've been doing all that. For the neighbour. And that, so I've got all that done today. And, repointed all the side of the porch up as well. Because all cement had come out of the top. You know, out of the eaves. So all that's been redone and that. So, yeah. That's what I've been up to. So I've done both sides of that. I've got to do the back porch and I've got some more capping stones to do and other bits. So, you know, just getting it done. Yeah. Yeah, good. Alright. Been shopping today, haven't you?
Mhm.
Been shopping and I've been cracking on with stuff.
Yeah, I did shopping. I had another stupid episode. Welcome back, Linda.
Yeah, I've got the back porch to do, Anna. Because all cement's come out of that one and all, so all that's got to be repointed. And that, you know, man, get it done, and then it's all repaired for them. Yeah. That's what I've been doing all week. So I can't be in two places at once. Unless I'm a fucking magician. Yeah. You okay there, cat? You got your box back, haven't you? You happy? Yeah? Oh, you're nice and comfy. You got the coping there. Okay. Yeah. Stay there. Yes? Yeah. No, so there's got to be one, and that's got to be one what's further up. Excuse me. Oh, you pig. Yes, there. No, that's not fucking right. No. There. That's it. Yeah. Yesterday we was out buying sand and cement, weren't we?
Yeah.
And stuff.
And I'm surprised that Charlie handled it.
Yeah.
Really, I am surprised.
It's alright. Hiya, kitty.
I'm glad you're okay.
Always at work.
No, I've got another job tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I have. I've got them two big square capping stones I've got to lift off. Well, I lifted them off, didn't I?
You did?
They're completely loose. It's fucking
They're
way
completely out. They're not.
I know, they're not attached.
Not attached at all.
No. So I've just got to take two more capping stones off. Take all the old mortar off and then rebed them. So I've got to get that done tomorrow.
Where's I got a garden job?
Yeah.
Which I like because it's in my peace zone. My favourite place zone. I was doing this bottom bit. Gary did that bit. Well, I did some of it obviously, but I did mainly this bit. So it's getting there somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
But it's getting there. I'll have to pull out whatever's next.
Nearly your weekend, then, see.
But other than that, it's getting there.
That's higher up.
It's getting there.
There's a few more of them pieces.
I'm trying to get these to sort themselves out.
Yeah. Look at that, that did bits straight away. No. Is that it? That's got to be it there. No. Bastard. No. Fuck. No. Fuck. Oh, but that's that bit, isn't it? Yep. Can't be that big, can it? Easy. Easy. Oh dear.
Some of my bits is probably in that lot.
Probably.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's all the sky.
Yep.
That's why I left it alone.
So what are you up to at the weekend then, see? Or was that a stupid question?
Possibly a silly question. Right, I'm going to call it now. Yeah.
Don't tell me though, it's 8:15.
Exactly.
I'm knackered. Fucking well, if you're out fucking doing all that, mixing cement and fucking bolting about. Fucking hell, that fuchsia tree needs cutting back.
I know, it's
Fucking hell, it's overgrown.
It's gone wild.
Yeah.
And I had that cut down before. At one point. Right, I will see you guys later. We'll play some games, whatever games you want to play. So,
what?
So I will see you guys later on. Lots of love to you all. Take care now. Bye everybody.
Bye everyone. I found another bit.
Yeah, okay. Right. Bye everybody.